Hello? Yeah, I'm back after a long time away. Um, some stuff going on in my life recently that forced me to stop making my reviews, and I'm sorry to everyone who enjoyed them. I know this channel's not very big, but I appreciate each and every one who viewed my reviews and liked them. But just as things changed to stop me from doing this, now things changed again to get me back, at least for a little while. I don't know how regular these are going to be for the moment, but back now. I'm glad to be doing it, and I'm going to start with one of the probably biggest movies that have come out this year, one of the first, and which is the sequel to the Mortal Kombat reboot, Mortal Kombat 2, of course, that's what it's called. All right, so, before I talk about this movie, I guess it seems appropriate to first talk about my opinions about not just the previous movie, the first movie, but just this media franchise as a whole. I'm not a big video gamer, so I haven't really played any of the games, but I am familiar, with some of the lore and the story elements, bits of trivia about the characters and the world and stuff. Never saw the original movies, from the 90s. Although, of course, I am familiar with all the memes and certain things. And it is glorious, or too bad you will die. Yeah, all that stuff, all that great stuff. Although it came from the second movie, Annihilation, instead of the first movie. So I guess it's just proof that it's better to be bad than bland. Right, but I did see the movie before this, the reboot from 2021, as well as some of the animated films that also came out around the same time. Those were pretty good, but this is the live-action movies. And my opinions about the first movie was that it was a lot of fun. It was a cool, action adventure kind of movie. But to me, there was something missing. I guess it was kind of like my feeling watching Jurassic World, the first one. It's a nice looking movie. There's some fun to be had, but it was lacking a kind of soul, and I can't really explain exactly why that was for me. I mean, I think about why one of the best things about the movie, one of the reasons why everyone loved that movie, which was the character of Kano, and just his attitude, and his quips, and just his overall personality was just very over the top, but a lot of fun. He didn't care about anything. It was just that guy, the asshole kind of character, but he was a lot of fun. And maybe that was the problem. Maybe it was just that the movie needed to be more like that. But then that also doesn't seem right, because I remember the opening, and the opening was very serious, but yet still so compelling. The opening where we saw Scorpion's origin, his family gets killed by Sub-Zero. All that was, they treated very seriously, and everyone was into it, including me. So and I understand that, if the movie was just full of characters like Kano, it probably would have gotten annoying really fast. So maybe the problem was just that it had all the right ingredients, but it just, didn't strike that right balance, maybe. That they had all the ingredients, but not the right recipes, so something like that. I just didn't feel very invested. And maybe it was because also the plot was kind of, not very focused. Things just happen. I mean, you can see kind of the broad strokes of the story, but it's just there was not a lot of strong progression between scenes across the plot and stuff. Maybe that was also a reason, and just a lack of emotional investment. But anyway, the second movie, what I will say about it, sorry for dragging on talking about the previous movies, but what I can say about this new one, number 2, which probably makes it really good. Like I'm a bit late to the party, I know. But, this is only now that I found the time to watch the movie, and everyone is already talking about like this is the best one, and um, I in a lot of ways agree with them for one principal reason, and this is also a reason that helps it stand above the previous movie. Um, was that it addressed one of the big flaws that I just talked about, which was the lack of emotional investment. For this movie, I did feel like there was a really strong sense of stakes, and I was invested, in the story and the struggle, the conflict, um, and I think a lot of that had to do with one, the plot seemed more focused. I mean, it was also a bit. There was a lot of stuff going on, but this is the one where we actually get to the tournament where the first one was all about establishing the characters, and we saw them train, and there was some betrayals and all that. That was probably why that one felt a bit unfocused. But here, we get the tournament, and there's maybe like one or two major subplots, so it helped put everything more into focus. But the big part of why I was more invested in this movie was just because of how they establish the new characters, right? Now going back to the first movie for a little bit, the for one of the things that people were kind of not sure about, even though this character still had a lot of fans, was that it focused on this new character, this original character Cole Young that they created for the movie, who still had a connection through being part of Scorpion's bloodline and all that. But the point being was that he was kind of, even though this was like an ensemble, he was like the main character and we were following him, but he was just, to me, he was very bland, I guess. But for this movie, the second one, we kind of got two characters who were kind of fulfilling now that Cole Young role, which is the first is Kitana. Actually, her backstory, opens the movie, and can be argued that she's kind of like the main character because she has the big conflict with the main villain, Shao Kahn, this time around. And she was good. I will say it wasn't quite perfect. Like I think they were kind of going for kind of like a Gamora, Thanos kind of like surrogate father-daughter, but there's like an animosity there. Like I don't want to spoil anything, but that's kind of like the basic gist of what their relationship is supposed to be like. But it wasn't done quite as well as that. But I did feel more invested in this, in her story compared to Cole's. I think. Maybe because of how they establish, her motivation in the opening and kind of like her role within the story, which, I'm not going to spoil too much, but, her dynamic within the story is not just, her being the reluctant daughter of the bad guy and stuff. There's a little bit more to her than that, and she gets some nice closure towards the end, and she's fine, but the one that really stood out for me, who was kind of like the best part of the movie for me, and probably for a lot of people, was the introduction of Johnny Cage. It was like the second part of the whole, the new Cole Young kind of character, wherein he's like the kind of the surrogate audience avatar, where he's the one that everyone has to exposit to, explain, what this world is and why things are the way it is. And for him, he's because, like I said, I didn't play the games, but I know a little bit about the Mortal Kombat media. So I know, he's like this, supposed to be, this cocky, kind of like down on his luck, but just really confident, talking crap about people kind of guy. This dude, Johnny Cage, he's all attitude and all that. And, the Johnny Cage in this movie, played by very well, by Carl Urban, he does have that, that kind of attitude here and there. He talks crap to some characters about the movie. He quips, and he's funny, but he's a more wizened, a more a seasoned kind of just washed up Johnny Cage, and it's not like he's going around trying to overcompensate by being very confident to, hide his insecurities about that. No, he treats this, his, the fact that he's washed up and he's kind of lost this sense of purpose. He's past his prime, and he's trying to he just lost sight of things. He's kind of lost, and he feels like he's kind of not fulfilled the promise of his youth. He's much older now, even though what he did meant so much to even just a few fans of his. Which there's a nice scene where he interacts with a fan in a bar, and it's just all this stuff. They treated very, very seriously. Carl Urban treats it very seriously, and it helps to give this character a lot of a sense of depth, of growth, and we do feel a lot of growth from him throughout the movie, where he finds this sense of purpose, where he finds this calling to become a hero, a real hero, not just some character that he acted in a movie. So all that was really cool, and it helped to ground the movie, and also to give it a sense of pathos, which was kind of missing from the first movie. And helping this out is also a lot of the interesting character dynamics that we have. Like, Johnny has a nice kind of relationship with Raiden, who has come back in this movie, and he's a much cooler character, I thought, this time around. He felt like a real mentor to these fighters, these champions. He was not just the crotchety, cranky old man who was looking down upon the crop of champions that they had for Mortal Kombat in the first movie. And it's not just him and Johnny. There's some interesting character dynamics with Katana, who I mentioned before, and she has a bodyguard assigned to her by Shao Kahn, Jade, but they kind of have like a sisterly bond, but it's also it's complicated by conflicting loyalties, and all that was pretty interesting. And yeah, so there's a far more sense of weight to the story through these characters. Like even some of the side characters who, in the first movie, we had like Goro and a bunch of those other fighters from Outworld that, fighting against the bad guys, but they were just kind of, some of them were cool, like Cabal, I think that's what his name was, the guy in the Iron Lung, he had a nice, fun personality, but the rest of them were just kind of villains, bad guys. But in this movie, even some of the smaller characters, are given probably more depth than they needed to have. Like, there's a point in the movie where the tournament portion kind of stops to have the main characters go on this side quest, and as they go on this quest, they encounter another kind of villain. But it's not just an obstacle that they have to overcome. There's an interesting arc that's they kind of go through with this villain, who's has a lot more personality to him than you would think. Like he's not just this really strong, really creepy looking kind of guy. There's some depth to him, and it's it all the way that resolves is it resolves in a way that's really really funny. I won't spoil it, but also kind of sweet as well. So all that was really cool. Like in this movie, you also get to explore more of the other worlds, and all that was so cool. Like we got to see different locations as they go through the different rounds of the tournaments, and the things that within these places that kind of affects the fights. Like there's one with like spikes coming out of the ground. There's one that's kind of like just floating against the backdrop of this some kind of void, which was really cool. I think this was like my favorite fight in the show, because visually it was very interesting, and also because of who was fighting and the way it was shot, just visually pleasing, and just really a lot of fun to just to see a lot of these different places seen as the backdrops for a lot of these fights. So yeah, all that was really cool, and helped to I would agree, make this one probably the best, the better Mortal Kombat so far, as far as live action movies go. But of course, it's not perfect. No movie is. There were some plot holes, some conveniences, which is also evident in the first movie. It still is here. But it's especially evident. It was especially evident to me because the editing was a bit weird. Also, Like, I'm not sure if anyone will feel the same way as I do, but it's like, for example, in Johnny's first fight in this movie, there's like, and when Johnny, first sees who he's going to fight, who his opponent is, there's barely a moment of a kind of like acknowledgement. They kind of just jump into it. Really weird. And there's a part later in the fight where Johnny's kind of knocked down and his opponent is approaching him, but when he come back to him, he's already like up and at him. So that was kind of weird. I know that this all seems like really small things, but there's weird editing choices like that throughout the movie as well. I'm hoping I'm not just the only one, and some other people will spot them as well. And it's not just that. Like I said, Katana, Johnny Cage, a lot of characters, were done really cool, or were used really well in this movie. But some of them, of course, especially the characters from the previous movie, were also kind of like, I don't want to say sidelined, but they were upstaged by some of the newer characters, which is a shame. That either speaks to kind of like the weakness of this movie and the script, like how they treat the previous characters, or it speaks to how poorly they were kind of established in the first movie. Even though a lot of them were fun, they weren't. There was a lack of character developments, in that first movie. Maybe there was especially one character who, really gets the shaft in this movie, and I wish I could say who it was. I don't want to spoil it, but it's just. But I really want to, because there's a lot to be said. But it's even though, there's a lot of mixed feelings towards his character, it is still kind of a shame what they did to him, and also for the actor and all that. And besides that, it's just a lot of the fights in this movie, which is kind of most of it was I'm shocked to say was just a bit okay. And even some of the gore, like the big final battle fatalities, even though there were some good ones, they didn't feel as memorable as the first movie, which is a real shame, because I know that these are action movies, and this is like a martial arts action movie, and to say that the fights don't feel as memorable, it should be a huge downgrade for it. But I guess it was just elevated by, like I said, the characters and the emotions that I talked about. And it's not that the fights a lot in this movie are bad. It's just I remember the ones from the first one more for some reason. And I guess that just that kind of speaks to, because I know I watched this movie with a friend who, even though he liked this movie, the sequel, I think he conceded that he liked the first one better. And even though I still think that this one was the better one of the two, I think I can understand where he's coming from. Because, there was a lot of, even though the first one altogether as a story, as a film, didn't quite come together, there were still a lot more memorable things, a lot more memorable fights, memorable, moments, beats, interesting, like, final kills, and, that kind of stuff. And interesting uses of powers, even though there's certainly some cool stuff here. But more than that, also there's a very sobering tone to this sequel. Like the first one was very, like I said, fun action adventure, and that helped make it fun, make it enjoyable despite the problems that it had. And this one is a lot more serious, and not necessarily. I don't mean that as a bad thing, but it's just I do really like the movie. It's just it took a while for it to get going for me, but once it did, it really did. But it just shows that it was moving a bit slower, and they wanted to take this more seriously, which honestly, as a whole, I think I would prefer over what they were doing with the first one, because it was still a lot more emotionally compelling for me, in addition to just being fun, all the action, martial arts and powers and stuff. But you could count this as a kind of strength of the first movie over this one, where the first movie was in a way more fun. This one was just more. It was more. I keep going back to the word serious, but that's kind of like the best way to describe it. It's like when you look at the Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, or Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man, the first movie, in in those series. It's just all about establishing the characters and stuff. And even though there might be problems, with those movies, it was a lot fun to explore that, and there was a lot of memorable scenes and moments. Ripped out of comic books or source material or stuff that people are familiar with. And then the second movie dives more deeply into a lot of the more themes and stuff that you could mine from the foundation that was established in the first movie, which is what this one does. But for a lot of people, though, those movies, their sequels were much better than the first one, and I can see why. And it's the same thing here. So it's just, yeah, you can like the first one better. It is certainly more fun. I will agree to that. But the second one was just which is a bit deeper, and that helped me to feel, to care more about it. Yeah, so I guess it's just it's in that way it's a preference thing. But yeah, those are my thoughts. You guys can let me know what you think. I'm really looking forward to it. This has gone on a bit long, but I haven't done this in a while, and I really want to get a lot of thoughts out there. So I hope you guys like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. I don't know when the next time I'll be back. Like I said, I don't know how regular this is going to be now, but I'm hoping to do more. And I'm just glad to be back, and I hope you guys enjoy this too. See you around.